Iatrogenic Awareness Month. October, every year, Iatrogenic Awareness Month. We're talking about people that are being harmed by psychiatrists and the government under mental health acts, specifically the Victorian Mental Health Act, because that's where I live. And in Australia, you have state and territory acts. So they need to be repealed by the state or territory that holds them. Now, these are statute laws. They're not laws tested by Parliament. I mean, they're not laws that are tested by courts. They are made by parliamentarians, therefore they can be repealed by parliamentarians. So how are we going to get them to do that? How are we going to get them to do that? When people are just going along on their trajectory, listening to the mainstream media, and the mainstream media doesn't think about the 10,000 people subjected to forced orders in Victoria every year. Those people that are held down and injected with chemicals in an escalation of torture. So those chemicals cause, iatrogenically, they cause something similar to stroke. So imagine that 24/7 indefinite pain from having your nervous system shut down. That's what neuroleptics cause. Now, neuroleptics are usually the drug that's being forced. The drug that is being tested on various people. Why? Why is it being tested? Why are there all these human trials on neuroleptics? Not just on people in their prime, not just people in their middle age, but elderly, children, anyone psychiatrists can get. That's the way it is. Now, I'm allowed to laugh. I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to show a gamut of human emotions. And anyone telling me that I can't express myself in all those various ways that humans do is a manipulative bastard. I saw one of them today. I saw them with he was with a young, bone-thin woman who was nodding along with the plainsfolk propaganda that she needed to be forcefully treated. Now, I've seen her all of 20 at the most. And I just think you're with that manipulative bastard who just tried to tell me not to be angry, told me not to smile because why are you laughing at me? Just absolutely a paranoid man, but he's not the one diagnosed, she is. And I just think, okay, here we have a situation. Now, a few years down the track, she'll either be dead or she will realise that she was being kept in a pretty bad situation. But she won't right now. She'll go along with plainsfolk propaganda for whatever reason she's doing that. But I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to take somebody who's going to stand there and try and say that I deserve to be tortured for 14 years because some idea that she was told it helped her and therefore she's going to reiterate that. And if she said anything different, she would be tortured again. I'm not going to take that and say, all right, empathy, peer support, yeah, sure, I've been schooled in that, and I've got to succumb to that. No, you're playing folk propaganda, and he's a paid shrill on whatever he works in. He's a manipulative bastard. Yeah, I can see psychobabble spin. It's just reeking from him. Now, interested in a protest. You are only interested in a protest when you are protesting with those people. If you don't have enough information, you don't argue with people and do your yeah buts. When you do that, you're acting against the protest. If you're interested in getting more information because you understand from the words that I've said as a victim of psychiatrists that this is not okay, that the Victorian Mental Health Acts need to be repealed, and you want more information so that you can say that as well, so that you can look up the places. You don't argue with us. You don't argue with victims of psychiatrists. And you certainly don't try and tell a victim of psychiatrists that is speaking out against psychiatry that they need to be okay with the Victorian Mental Health Act that forces 10,000 people every year. It's not okay, because this is a nebulous law that is designed to exploit. And whether you're a good little slave, right, that's going to go to the laboratory and do as you're told, and you're going to say, okay, I know there can be far worse, so I'll be okay with that. No, I don't know what this young bone-thin woman was subjected to, what far worse is for her, and for her to be comforted by torturous drugs. Now, she didn't get it as badly as I did, but, anybody subjected to forced psychiatry, it's not a decent thing. No way. But there's people who will say they deserve things. And they will say they deserve things for various reasons, because they're afraid or because they're being broken. When you get broken by torture, you can be indoctrinated. You can be thinking that you deserved to be tortured. And you no longer call it torture because it's treatment. And the things, all the effects, the iatrogenic effects of those drugs that are causing you harm, you're going, okay, those effects are me. They're my disease. Which is ridiculous, but that's what the psychiatrist will tell you. That's what you're taught to believe. Even though you can look up the drug's website and you can see that all those effects, those things that are causing harm, are there. You can also look up the human trials. Now, you used to not have access to these things for years and years and years, but now you can look up the human trials that are happening, that are possibly happening to you, and find out what that drug did to people, how many people were killed, and what sort of people they were using. Now, in psychiatry, you are not going to get anybody who will volunteer for a neuroleptic trial. You just don't, because neuroleptics, nobody wants to be subjected to something that causes 24/7 indefinite effects that are like a stroke. Nobody wants that. It's just totally debilitating, totally painful, horrifying experience, and it causes a person to suffer sensitivities. So a lot of those people who have been through forced psychiatry will get picked on further by psychiatrists because they can't use mainstream deodorants. They will burn that person's skin because the person then becomes sensitive to petroleum-based substance. Now, petroleum-based substances are not going to do anybody any good, but you have too much of them, which are in the drugs, and suddenly even that's the stuff in deodorants. You put that on the skin, and you got burns and rashes and peelings, and then the psychiatrists have the cheek to demand you wear these things that sting you. Now, there's always alternatives. You can go to organic stores and use ones that are less toxic, or people use things like lemons. So there are alternatives for people who are suffering through that at the moment. And they probably don't have much access to the internet either, so they probably won't hear this. But if you know someone who's suffering from chemical sensitivity, or that they, don't use stuff and you want them to, please don't force them to use that shit, shit. There is too much toxic rot, too much poison, too many scam industries in this world. You've fallen for it. I see all those people walk past me in the street while I'm protesting on this month of October, Iatrogenic Awareness Month. And I'm protesting because I have to. I have to. If I don't do this, the Victorian Mental Health Acts won't be repealed. And I'll know that because I didn't do anything, because I thought, oh, I'm free now, that's good, I'm free, they're not going to attack me again, hopefully. Now, I had 14 years of that, in and out, and I kept thinking they wouldn't get me again, and they did. I'm not saying they're ever going to be able to get me again. But that's not the point, is it? It's not all about me. It's about all those other people. It's about NJE and PBU fighting in the courts to stop forced electrocution, and they'd also probably like to stop the forced drugging as well. Can they do that? Well, we've got these mental health acts, this Victorian Mental Health Act. No, they can't. Why can't they? Well, because it's a system of force. And because they're very lucky, NJA and PBU, to even have legal aid, because in Australia, Victoria, less than 9% of civilians who are subjected to forced psychiatry get legal aid. Now, you've got 10,000 Victorians on force orders, only 9% of them get legal aid. And this is government-forced human experimentation. It's exploitation. Government makes a lot of money from it. But pharmaceutical companies bring in, money for human research. They were boasting about it. You look up the papers, the pharmaceutical companies go, oh, Australia, we bring in this money. You should increase your human experimentation. And so the health minister does. He announces, Greg Hunt, announces that he's going to increase the human experimentation budget. Whoa! What? Why clapping? I wasn't clapping. I was mocking. I was mocking those who clap at that. You're disgusting. You're a disgusting breach of human rights. How could you be so cruel? How could you be so ignorant if you don't know? If you don't know, you should know. And if you say later on that you didn't know, how long didn't you know? Did you hear me in the street today and just ignored me? Or you do know? You do know that there's somebody saying that the Victorian Mental Health Act needs to be repealed. You do know because 1 in 4 people are subjected to psychiatrists. You do know because half the population in Australia that dies, are on PBS psychiatric prescriptions. Forget spiders, forget snakes, just don't get poisoned by a psychiatrist. That's Australia. We are the land of doublespeak, where torture is called care and help and medicine. It's still torture. No matter what name you give it, no matter how you try to cover these things up, and it's becoming less simple for them to cover up all their forced human experimentation. When it's all out there on the web, you can look up, okay, you're on this drug. Let's see if there's a human trial going on. Ooh, that looks like what you're on. Oh, and it's happening in Melbourne, Australia. Ooh. It's not okay to make money this way, to think that that's a great boost to the economy. People talk about animal rights and how horrendously cruel we are as humans to animals. And they forget that humans are actually far worse to each other in many ways. And they never talk about it because it's so disgusting. It disgusts them so much that they're doing this. And it is not for any real worth. Sure, like the electronics testing, okay? So electrocution under general anesthetic. So they'll, find out how many pulses of electricity under general anesthetic harms this person's brain to what degree. So they do a fair bit of dose, and then on somebody else they'll do a different experimental. They'll do a whole trial of different people with the same thing and compare that to another way of doing it, or different hemispheres or whatever. And then this information from that human trial. Now, you're talking about people who are forced, okay? And in a system of force, there's no consumer market. There's no voluntary people. It's all coercion under duress. It's all people who are concerned about far worse. Because it's always far worse. I mean, you get held down and injected with these horrendously debilitating drugs, right? Not only is that horrible to be held down and stripped and jabbed in the arse with a prick full of poison. Not only is that horrible, but the effects of that, the acufase, just your tongue moving everywhere, your muscles twitching. It's just so painful, and then your thoughts are shut down, your ability to think, your physical ability as well, your ability to communicate in any way possible. You grow blank. You look at yourself in the mirror, you're shut down. Know yourself. It's not the worst of it, It's just, so horrible. So, I mean, I can see how these drugs would aggravate a person, make a person so angry that they would misdirect their anger onto the people that are not the psychiatrists, not the government. So those people who are getting angry, they should be doing protesting. There's nothing wrong with anger when it's directed into the protest. Directed in the right way. If you're going to misdirect your anger into another person because you're being poisoned to death, because you're being told that poisoning is symptoms of your illness and it just confuses the F out of you, then that's not okay either, because that's just gaslighting a person who instinctively knows it's the drug, but he wants to believe the white coat. There are people like that, they get indoctrinated. They don't quite understand it, because I'm a fourth generation atheist. I don't really understand religious people, really. I know they get indoctrinated into some weird stuff, and I don't mean to be offensive or anything, but yeah, it's like, you get hypnotized by a white coat. It's far less... it's far easier for a white coat to indoctrinate and hypnotize a person, because they're torturing them. All right, you do have to say, you're forced to play the game, say things under torture that, yes, you're okay with the tablets, yes, please decrease my dose because I'm getting better, I like this drug. You don't, but you're going to say that so you can get out of arbitrary detention, so you won't be tied in a 4-point fetter, so you won't be electrocuted under general anaesthetic, so they won't add another drug. They won't increase the dose, they'll decrease it and let you free. Well, free to a degree. I mean, you're not free until you're free. And from the drugs and from the psychiatrists. And even then, there's still that, threat there, because the Victorian Mental Health Act is still there. That Exploitation Act is still there. And those people like Gwyneth Jones, who whistleblow on retirement village staff, you got to have backup. And even her, she had the backup to prove that the retirement village staff were stealing her money. She recorded them because she had a criminologist here. Someone else who is elderly, and that would be happening too. They wouldn't necessarily get around to doing that, or even think of doing it, or even know what technology to use necessarily. And they would be put away forever, just on what is said about them, which is not true. So it's criminals lying to have someone like Gwyneth Jones put away. And that's the point, isn't it? You have a nebulous law that tortures a person, detains them, shuts them up, gets them to comply with agreeing to torture and agreeing to a really derogatory label, because there's far worse. Pain thresholds get far worse. Increased torture, increased duress, increased arbitrary detention, increased interrogation and derogation, dehumanisation. You have a system like that. Well, it silences whistleblowers and victims of crime, doesn't it? And if you think it doesn't, you're a fool. If you really think in the land of doublespeak that torture is care and help and medicine, you're a fool. And there's a lot of fools in this country. A lot of people that are indoctrinated. Psychiatric regime's been going on 200 years, over 200 years. That's too long. We've got to end this now. We've got to say to our ministers in Iatrogenic Awareness Month, October, that we're not going to have this Victorian Mental Health Act anymore. Victoria is not going to be the worst place in the world for forced human experimentation anymore. We're not going to have this health minister's budget for forced human experimentation. We're not going to agree with what Daniel Andrews says about forced human experimentation. We are going to demand via e-petitions, whatever it takes, protests in the street, whatever it takes. We're going to demand that these bastards, they stop doing that. They stop that. They abolish the Mental Health Acts. They abolish the Victorian Mental Health Act. Because forced human experimentation is not okay. You have got to say it's not okay.